What's going on, everybody? In today's video, we are checking out another interview with Geddy Lee. This interview is on Rush and his love of the bass guitar, and I am wondering if this is coinciding with the release of his big bass book that he put out, which would be cool to get at some point. That's what we're going to check out. Yeah, we'll see what's happening. If you're new here, please subscribe. Check out my videos. I got all kinds of videos. I got bass play-alongs, live performances of bands, musician tips. I got reaction videos 9 a.m. and at 4 p.m. I do one with my wife every day. In the description below, Amazon affiliate links to Rush vinyl, all kinds of other links, all kinds of other information. Definitely check out the description. All right, Geddy Lee on Rush and his love of bass guitar. Cool. This should be interesting. I'm digging doing these interviews as reactions because it gives you more depth and appreciation into the music and also the people behind the music. It makes things more relatable. It brings depth. It's cool. It's definitely really cool. So let's just do this. Bam.
When I made this book and the whole process of making
Wow, that
this
is a big book.
Was an education on so many levels. First of all, in the art of manufacturing musical instruments, that was my biggest learning curve because although I'd held the bass in my hands for over 40 years, I really had not given any thought to its invention and its early evolution. So all the research on the early Fender basses, the early Gibson basses, and even the early Rickenbackers was just a non-stop, university class on how these things came to be. And of course, while you're learning about its evolution and the change in pickups and the body shapes, you're playing these instruments as I'm acquiring them, I'm playing them. So I learned so much about tone and how tone developed and how the bass player got more and more control over his own tone through those years. And also it was a lesson in mass production and the whole US mantra of the 50s of creating mass production. And that was a surprise for me how much it encompassed in a very specific way the history of American manufacturing in the middle of the century, really. When you look at Leo Fender and you look at what was happening in the Fender factory, it was really a prime example of American ingenuity and cutting-edge technology to make a product on a mass-produced level. So I can't even begin to tell you how much I learned.
That's cool.
Now, whether I retain all that is another question.
Yeah.
The original manuscript was 845 pages.
Wow.
As my editor likes to remind me. And of course we had to cut it down, and there were some smaller stories. One story that we did cut out of the book and was determined to be a bit too nerdy, even for me. But I love the story, and it's an examination of Jack Bruce's EB3s. Now, Jack Bruce was a big hero of mine.
That's cool.
And
the
earliest versions of the Gibson EB3, now this is going into nerd territory, he was seen playing a early version which, instead of the rotary selector, it had just a switch, a toggle switch. And it's very hard to find pictures of Jack Bruce with that toggle switch, but I did manage to find it. And I've talked to other bass players subsequently, like Bob Daisley, who at one time did own one with a toggle switch. So I wrote this really interesting comparison, because when you read interviews with Jack Bruce, he makes out like he only had one EB3. Yet I have all these pictures where he's not playing the same EB3. So I thought that was a really interesting sort of bit of nerdism, but my editor didn't agree, and it sort of went in the cutting room floor.
Yeah.
Through all the
I'm
interviews
a bass player. I'm here for it.
I did, I learned so much about their personal stories and their connection with the instrument, which was my focus. But when you talk about which bands would I have liked to have played with, any band I loved growing up, I dreamed of being able to play with. I dreamed of, you know, filling Jack Bruce's shoes in the Cream, John Paul Jones's shoes in Led Zeppelin, even Jack Cassidy's shoes in the early Jefferson Airplane. These guys were my heroes, and their bands were awesome to me, and I would have loved to have played with any of them. You know, Chris Squire and Yes. Did I think I could play with them? Fuck no. But, I would have loved to have given it a shot. The most tonally versatile bass I own, it's hard to say, but I would probably say of the vintage instruments that the book bases itself around, I would have to say the jazz bass, the Fender jazz bass.
Love it. Love it.
And I say that because
love it.
There is a great variety in the design in it of itself. What Leo Fender set out to do when making the jazz bass was he already had a fantastically established workhorse bass like the Fender Precision bass, which he invented in the early 50s.
But the jazz bass can get that.
In 1960, he
close
brought
enough
out
to that sound.
This bass that was supposed to give you more range of sound. Now, the modern basses that are being made today, I'm sure, are much more versatile in some ways. But if you're talking about a vintage instrument, I would say the jazz bass has the ability to be bright, deep. You know, it has all that built into itself.
Yeah, love it. I got a 74
If I could play bass on any one
it's
song, of all the songs that I loved, it's very hard to choose one, but in particular, I guess I would say Roundabout by Yes, because having played that now with them at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame many years later, it put me in mind about how much that song meant to me, and how rare it is to find a song that A, was a big hit single, B, was a complicated song by a complicated band, and C, was led by the drive and the sound of that bass part. So to me, it's one of the greatest bass parts ever written for a rock song. So I'd be very pleased if that had been me. The single most satisfying moment of me as a bass player in Rush is very hard to choose out of, you know, 40 years of recorded music. When I think back of the songs that I love to play in Rush, I think of a lot of the material on the Clockwork Angels album to me was sort of a sweet spot, you know. A song like The Garden, for example, which was largely written on bass, it's one of my favorite bass parts, even though it's not the most complicated. I really couldn't choose one particular song out of a body of work as varied as ours. Of course, you know, I think back to songs like YYZ or any of the crazy instrumentals we did over the years, and I'm very proud of that work. But it's hard to choose one. I've always thought that Rush's music really lent itself to theatrical reproduction, especially the concept albums such as 2112 or more recently Clockwork Angels. I think would be fantastic opportunities to orchestrate the music a little bit more, get into a whole different kind of presentation. But visually they're quite striking. The stories have a lot of potential in terms of staging and imaginative scenery, and I think they really are tailor-made for that. So I'd love to see that happen sometime. Judging a bass player is really about the context of that bass player. If I were to pick the greatest jazz fusion bassist of all time, of course it would be Jaco Pastorius. If I was to pick the greatest, you know, progressive rock bassist of all time, it would have to be Chris Squire without question. For a pure rock bassist, I think between John Paul Jones and Jack Bruce, you'd have to have a playoff and Jack's no longer with us, sadly, so I guess the crown goes to John Paul Jones. But
Jesus.
I think it's all about context. It's very hard to pick one guy out and say he does that the best. If you look at Flea's playing, for his style of music, I mean, it's fantastic. He's an amazing player. I have great respect for his bass playing. But how can you compare that to what Chris Squire did? Because it's a whole different genre.
I mean, yeah. Nice. I love that. I mean, you know, I'm a bass player, and he was talking about bass the whole time, so I'm very biased. But that was really cool. I love that. That was awesome. I knew he was gonna say the jazz bass. I knew it. I'm like, he's gonna say jazz bass because that's the truth, right? If he said anything different, I'd be surprised, and it would probably make me want to check whatever he said out. But as a bass player and as a jazz bass player, that's what I would say too. The jazz bass, it is the most versatile. It can do everything that you want. You can cover so many gigs with just the jazz bass. You don't need a modern bass. There are some gigs and some things that a modern bass will do better, but not all, not most. A jazz bass, you'll cover most. Oh yeah, cover most. You can do all kinds of things. So I have a 1974 Fender jazz bass. I love the P bass sound, but I don't like playing P basses because the neck is thick. It's wider. I don't like that. I like a Fender jazz bass, jazz neck. I like the jazz neck better than a precision neck, but I like the precision sound. Most of the time when I'm playing my jazz bass, I'm only using the neck pickup, which gets more of a P bass sound. It's not completely a P bass, okay? It's not a P bass, but that's what I'm doing. No different than this. This is a more modern, it's a Fender Aerodyne, and it's a PJ. I nearly never use the J part. I'm always using that, and then rolling up and down the tone knob. And on my Fender Jazz, which is 2 jazz pickups, I'm using the neck pickup, and I'm rolling up and down the tone. And if I need to, depending on the gig, I'll use both pickups. But most of what I do, I don't need both pickups. I'm not using both pickups. I can get the brightness just with the tone knob. You know, what I'm looking for, just with the tone knob. Anyways, jazz bass. I love that. That was awesome. I gotta get that book. I mean, everybody's been telling me that. Everybody has been commenting that, like, you need to check out his bass book. You gotta check out his big bass book, all that kind of thing. So this interview, whoo, that was awesome. That was super cool. I loved it. I'm happy about that. That was great to watch. Cool. All right, let's just end it right there on a positive note. Thanks for watching. If you're new here, please subscribe. Check out my videos. I got all kinds of videos, reaction videos, 9 a.m. I do one at 4 p.m. with my wife every day. I got bass play-alongs, live performances with bands, musician tips, all kinds of videos. Definitely check it out. In the description below, I got Amazon affiliate links to Rush Vinyl. I got all kinds of other links and information. Definitely check out the description. Thanks for watching. I'll catch you in the next video.